Dawn crept slowly across the battered outskirts of the village, its first rays smothered by a dense, colorless fog that clung to the ground like a living thing. What had once been an orchard lay in ruin, splintered trees jutting at odd angles, broken branches scattered across the frozen soil, and shards of metal glinting faintly beneath the mist. Every sound seemed muted, swallowed by the damp air. It was the kind of morning where even the birds stayed silent. Sergeant Lysa squinted into the haze, her breath forming pale clouds that vanished almost instantly. She had grown used to mornings like this, mornings where the world felt suspended, as if holding its breath before something happened. Her small reconnaissance unit crouched nearby, their silhouettes half hidden by the uneven ground and the remains of a collapsed barn. Each soldier's face carried the same mixture of fatigue and determination, familiar on this front. "Engines again," murmured Andrei, the team's lookout raising a hand to still the others. The rumble was distant at first, like a storm many kilometers away, but growing steadily. The vibrations traveled through the earth in faint pulses. Lisa knelt and pressed her gloved fingers into the cold dirt, feeling the tremors confirm what her ears already told her. Russian armor was massing again, moving along the far edge of the village road. Beside her, Danilo adjusted the straps on his protective vest. He was the youngest, barely old, enough to have finished technical school before the invasion changed his life. His hands fidgeted constantly, restless with equal parts nerves and focus. Beside him sat a small RC car, patched, dusty, and scarred from too many missions. To anyone else, it might have looked like a child's lost toy. To the unit, it was a sliver of advantage they couldn't afford to waste. Lisa studied him for a moment. "You slept at all?" she asked quietly. "A little," he lied, eyes fixed on the drifting fog. She managed a tired smile. None of them slept much anymore. The nights were full of distant flashes, moments of fear, and long thoughts about home. But the fog gave them cover, and cover meant possibilities, small ones, fragile ones, but enough to matter. "Remember," she said softly, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder, "we're not trying to outrun them today." He nodded. "I know. We outthink them." And together, the unit melted deeper into the mist, waiting for the storm to arrive. The fog thickened as the team moved into position, settling over the wrecked village like a veil that blurred the shapes of fallen walls and burnt-out vehicles. Every broken corner became a shadow, every mound of rubble a potential hiding place. In that stillness, the small RC cars looked almost absurd, fragile scraps of metal and plastic, surrounded by the ruins of grown men's machines. But to the Ukrainians crouched in the trench, they were quiet allies. Lisa crouched low behind a slab of shattered concrete, peering over the edge. The RC cars were lined up in front of Danilo, like tiny soldiers awaiting orders. They wore crude camouflage, bits of cloth, tufts of grass, whatever could break their outlines. In the half-light, they blended surprisingly well into the terrain. Danilo inhaled deeply, then exhaled through pursed lips as he lifted the controller. For all his inexperience, his hands steadied the moment he touched the device. The others liked to joke that the controller was his second heartbeat. Once he had it, he seemed to forget fear entirely. "All eyes open," Lysa whispered. Slow and silent, the little machines rolled forward, their plastic wheels crunching softly on debris. The sound was faint, almost lost beneath the wind brushing over broken bricks. The soldiers watched with attention they did not speak aloud. The RC cars crept past a fallen fence, then slipped through a narrow gap in a collapsed wall. From their vantage point, the team tracked their progress in glimpses. Here a shadow moving under a stovepipe. There a small glint of metal beneath a shattered window frame. Danilo guided them with the careful precision of someone threading a needle in a shaking room. A distant metallic groan drifted on the wind, the slow churn of treads or engines shifting weight. The rumble grew heavier by the minute, rolling through the fog like a giant waking from sleep. Danilo froze for a moment, throat tightening. The sound always did that to him. Lisa leaned in close enough that he could hear her whisper over the thudding in his ears. "Keep going. You're doing fine." He swallowed, nodded, and nudged the controller. One of the small RC cars slipped beneath the husk of an overturned tractor, its last hiding place before the final stretch. The team exchanged anxious glances. The ambush depended on timing. Too soon, and it failed. Too late, and they would all have to run. Above them, the engines rumbled louder, shaking dust from the ruined walls. The moment was coming. The whole battlefield felt as if it were holding its breath. The fog shifted as the first dark silhouettes emerged, hulking, shapes moving with the slow, heavy confidence of machines that believed nothing could stop them. Their engines growled through the broken village streets, echoing against shattered walls and fractured rooftops. The ground trembled with each lurch forward, sending tiny ripples through puddles of melted frost. Lisa pressed herself closer to the earth, barely daring to raise her head above the trench's edge. She counted the vehicles by their shadows first, then by the glints of metal breaking through the mist. 3, 4. Maybe more behind those? It didn't really matter how many. What mattered was timing. Beside her, Danilo adjusted his grip on the controller, though his palms were slick with nervous sweat. His breathing came unevenly at first, but he forced himself to take slow, steady draws of air. He focused on the feed of vibrations under his fingertips, the subtle resistance of the controls. In moments like these, everything else disappeared. The fog, the thunder of engines, even the fear. Hendry risked a glance over the trench. "They're sticking close to the road," he whispered. "Visibility's bad for them too." Lisa nodded. Fog was friend and foe alike, but today it wrapped the Ukrainian unit like a cloak. From beneath the overturned tractor, the small RC car waited, still and nearly invisible, tucked into shadows deeper than the fog itself. Danilo inched it forward with a feather-light touch, guiding it out just as the lead vehicle lumbered past. The tiny machine darted across the cracked pavement like a startled animal. "Easy, easy," Lisa murmured, though Danilo couldn't possibly ease up anymore. A brief silence settled between the roar of engines, a thin breath of stillness. In that sliver of calm, he pressed the final control. He flinched instinctively, squeezing his eyes shut as if bracing against a bright flash. The explosion tore through the fog, a deafening burst of sound that shook loose rusted beams, rattled shattered windows, and sent spirals of dust twisting skyward. The shockwave rattled even the trench where the Ukrainians lay. For a heartbeat, everything disappeared behind a curtain of gray and brown. The Russian column jolted to a halt. Confusion rippled through the vehicles, hatches cracking open, voices shouting, engines revving uncertainly. No one seemed to know what had hit them, or from where. The fog, once serene, now churned with drifting smoke. Danilo's hands hovered motionless above the controller. He stared at the rising dust, chest heaving. Lisa touched his arm gently. "You did it," she whispered. Though the moment allowed no celebration, only breathing, only survival. Above them the echoes slowly faded, leaving a tense, trembling stillness in their wake. The ringing in their ears lingered long after the blast had faded. For several seconds, none of the soldiers moved. The entire world seemed suspended in a grey haze of dust and fog. Even the wind held its breath, as if the land itself was trying to understand what had just happened. Slowly, the rumble of engines died down. The Russian column remained frozen, disoriented by the sudden shock. Some soldiers shouted orders into the fog, their voices cracking with confusion. Others stayed hidden inside their vehicles, unsure whether more unseen threats crawled beneath the mist. The strike had done what the Ukrainians needed most. It had bought them precious, fleeting time. Lisa peered over the trench, her face streaked with dirt. She scanned the haze for movement, then signaled her team. "We're done here. Pack up quietly." There was no triumph in her voice, only the steady urgency of someone who understood that survival depended on disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. Danilo lowered the useless controller, staring at it as though it had aged years in his hands. The small device trembled faintly between his fingers. Andriy nudged him gently. "Hey, you good?" Danilo nodded, though his eyes remained distant. "Just thinking." His voice was barely audible over the crackle of settling debris. The unit climbed out of the trench one by one, crouching low as they moved through what remained of the village's outskirts. Every step crunched softly on fallen glass or splintered wood. The fog helped cloak their retreat, but it also made the world feel claustrophobic, like they were walking through the echoes of their own actions. As they passed a collapsed house, Lysa slowed her pace until she walked beside Danilo. "You did what you had to," she said gently. "I know." He hesitated before continuing. "It's strange. It's just a toy. Until it isn't. It feels wrong that something so small can change everything." Lisa's gaze softened. "War twists everything, tools, people, even the things meant for play. None of us wanted this." She glanced back at the drifting smoke. "But until it's over, we use what we can to protect who's left." They continued across the ruined fields, the fog gradually thinning as the sun tried to break through. Birds finally began to stir in the distance, their hesitant chirps a small reminder that life still existed beyond the front. As the last echoes faded behind them, Danilo looked once more over his shoulder. The smoke curled upward into the morning sky like a dark, frayed ribbon. He whispered under his breath, almost to himself, "One day." "No more of this." Lysa heard him, and for a moment, despite everything, she allowed herself to hope he might be right.